I never thought forgetting could be so quiet. People think forgetting is loud. They imagine shouting. They imagine doors slamming. They imagine fights that shake the walls. But real forgetting is soft. It comes in small moments. Moments that feel harmless. Moments no one notices. That is how it began in my home. I remember the sound of rain that morning. Not heavy rain, just a gentle tapping on the window. The kind that makes the house feel smaller and the world feel far away. I was standing in the kitchen, bare feet on cold tiles. My hands were deep in soapy water, washing dishes that were not mine alone. Plates, cups, a pan with burned edges. I had woken up early, as usual. Before the sun, before the birds, before him. He was still asleep in our bedroom. The man I had married 12 years ago. The man I had once believed would always see me. When we were young, he used to watch me closely. Not in a loud way. Just small looks. Like he was afraid I might disappear if he looked away. He noticed everything back then. If I cut my hair, he noticed. If I was tired, he noticed. If I smiled a little less, he noticed. I used to think that love meant being seen. Now, standing alone in the kitchen, I wondered when that stopped. The kettle began to whistle. Sharp, sudden. I turned it off and poured water into his favorite cup. Same cup every day, blue. A small crack near the handle that I never fixed because he liked it, just the way it is. I smiled at that thought. A quiet smile, one that no one saw. When he came into the kitchen, he didn't look at me. Not because he was rude. Not because he was angry. He was just used to me. He sat at the table, picked up his phone, sipped his tea. This tastes different, he said. My heart paused. Different how? I asked gently. I don't know, he replied, still looking at the screen. Just different. I nodded. I used less sugar. Oh, he said. Then nothing. No thank you. No question why. No look. Just silence. That was the moment. The first small cut. He didn't know that I had used less sugar because the doctor warned him last week. He didn't know because I went alone. He didn't know because he was busy. Busy had become his excuse. Busy had become my loneliness. I watched him eat breakfast. The same way I had watched him for years. I noticed how his shoulders looked heavier now. How the lines on his forehead stayed even when he smiled. How his phone never left his hand. He noticed none of this about me. After he left for work, the house became very quiet. Too quiet. I cleaned the table slowly. Not because it was dirty. Because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I passed by the mirror in the hallway. Stopped. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Her hair was tied in a loose knot. Her eyes looked tired. Her lips were dry. I tried to remember when I last bought something just for myself. I couldn't. When we got married, I had dreams. Not big dreams. Not loud dreams. Simple ones. I wanted a home that felt warm. I wanted laughter at dinner. I wanted to grow old with someone who still noticed me. I never imagined becoming invisible. In the early years, sacrifice felt easy. I left my job when our first child was born. Just for a while, I told myself. I stopped meeting friends. Family comes first, I told myself. I learned his habits, his moods, his silences. I told myself that love meant adjusting. No one told me that adjusting slowly erases you. That afternoon, I sat near the window with a cup of tea. My tea, not sweet, plain. The rain had stopped. The sky looked empty. I thought about calling him. Just to hear his voice. I didn't. I didn't want to interrupt his busy day. That's what I always told myself. In the evening, he came home late. "Sorry," he said, hanging his coat. "Work." I nodded. "Dinner is ready." He washed his hands, sat down. A few bites in, he frowned. "This is cold," he said. I looked at the clock. He was 2 hours late. "I can heat it again," I said softly. He sighed. "It's fine." But his tone said it wasn't. We ate in silence. The kind of silence that fills your ears. The kind that makes your heart feel loud. I wanted to tell him about my day. About the rain. About the cracked cup. I didn't. I didn't think he would listen. That night, lying beside him in bed, I stared at the ceiling. He was already asleep. I remembered the nights he used to ask, "Are you okay?" even when I said nothing. Now, my silence had become normal. People often ask, "When did things go wrong?" They expect one big answer. An argument. A betrayal. A mistake. But the truth is smaller. Things didn't go wrong. They just faded. I turned on my side and faced him. His face looked peaceful in sleep. Almost innocent. I wanted to touch his hand. I didn't. I didn't want to wake him. That sentence had become my life. As I closed my eyes, a thought stayed with me. Not angry. Not bitter. Just sad. I wondered if he would notice. If one day, I stopped doing all the things he no longer saw. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm again. My body had learned this habit. Even on days when I was tired. Even on days when my bones felt heavy. I lay there for a moment, staring at the dim light slipping through the curtains. He was still asleep beside me, turned away, his back facing mine. There was a small space between us now. Not enough to call distance. But enough to feel it. I slipped out of bed quietly. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my face again. I used to rush past mirrors. Now I stopped at them, like I was checking on someone else. "Are you still here?" I whispered once. The woman in the mirror did not answer. Breakfast was the same as always. Toast, eggs, tea. I packed his lunch carefully. Cut fruit into neat pieces. Wrapped everything the way he liked. I remembered when he once said, "You always think of these little things." He hadn't said it in years. When he left, the door closed softly. No kiss. No, "See you later." Just the click of the lock. The house returned to its silence. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still on the counter. As if the sound might come back. As if he might open the door again and say he forgot something. He didn't. I spent the day doing what I always did. Cleaning, cooking, folding clothes that were not mine alone. Each task felt small on its own. Together, they felt endless. I washed his shirts carefully, checking for stains. Ironed them smooth, hung them in order. I noticed one shirt had a missing button. I fixed it. He would never know. In the afternoon, my phone rang. It was my sister. "You never visit anymore," she said gently. I looked around the living room. At the sofa I cleaned every day. At the clock that moved too slowly. "I'm busy," I replied. The word tasted strange. Busy doing what? Keeping a life running that no one noticed. "I'll come soon," I added. I didn't know when. That evening, I felt a sharp pain in my back while lifting a pot. I stopped and leaned against the counter, breathing slowly. The pain faded, but the fear stayed. I thought about seeing a doctor. Then I thought about the cost. The time. The trouble. I decided to rest instead. I always decided that. When he came home, he looked tired. "Long day," he said, dropping his bag. I nodded. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. He didn't ask about my day. He never did anymore. We ate again in silence. This time, he scrolled through his phone between bites. I watched him instead. I noticed how he smiled at something on the screen. A real smile. It hurt more than anger ever could. After dinner, he turned on the television. The room filled with noise. Laugh tracks. Voices. I sat beside him, close enough to touch. Far enough to feel alone. I wanted to say something. Do you remember our first apartment? Do you remember how we used to talk for hours? Do you still see me? The words stayed trapped inside. Later that night, while he slept, I opened an old drawer. Inside were letters. Not many. Just a few. Notes he wrote before we were married. Short. Simple. I miss you. I can't wait to see you. You matter to me. I read them slowly, like they belonged to someone else. I pressed one against my chest. I wondered when I stopped mattering. The next few weeks passed the same way. Days blended together. Morning to night. Night to morning. I canceled plans without realizing it. Stopped calling friends. Stopped wearing my favorite clothes. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself this was adulthood. Marriage. Responsibility. But deep inside, something felt wrong. One afternoon, I felt dizzy while hanging laundry. The world tilted for a second. I grabbed the railing and closed my eyes. I imagined telling him, I don't feel well. I imagined his reply, you'll be fine. The thought made me sit down. That night, as we lay in bed, I turned toward him. Can I ask you something? I said softly. He murmured, half asleep. Do you think I've changed? He paused, shrugged. I don't know, he said. We all change. Then he turned away. That was all. I stared at his back again. My chest felt tight. I realized then that my sacrifices had become invisible. Because I had made them quietly. Because I never complained. Because I never asked to be seen. Love, I learned, can survive many things. Distance. Silence. Routine. But it struggles when one person keeps giving. And the other stops noticing. That night, I cried quietly. Not because of pain. Not because of anger. Because I felt myself fading. And no one seemed to notice. By the time I noticed, the silence had settled into our lives. It was already too late to name it. Silence is like dust. It gathers slowly. You don't see it at first. Then one day, everything feels heavy. Mornings became quicker. No shared tea. No small talk. He checked his phone while tying his shoes. I stood near the door, holding his lunch. Here, I said. He took it without looking. Thanks. The door closed. That single word stayed in the air. I began speaking less. Not because I had nothing to say. Because I had learned what happens when you speak and no one listens. My thoughts stayed inside me now. They felt safer there. One afternoon, I found an old photo album. I sat on the floor and opened it slowly. There we were, smiling, young. His arm was around my shoulders. My head leaned against his chest. I remembered how he used to ask about my dreams. How he once said, "Tell me everything." I closed the album. There was no one left to tell. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. For a moment, hope stirred inside me. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, he said. Just finished early. We sat at the table together. I waited. He ate quietly. Hope faded. Do you remember our anniversary? I asked suddenly. He looked up, confused. Of course, he said after a pause. It's next month, right? I nodded. It had been last week. I smiled anyway. "Oh," I said. "Right." I cleared the dishes before he could see my face. That night, I lay awake again. My body felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. I wondered how many moments I had swallowed. How many times I had chosen peace over truth. I wondered when silence became my role. Weeks passed. He stopped asking where I was. Stopped noticing when I stayed quiet all day. If dinner was ready, things were fine. If the house was clean, things were fine. That became the measure of me. One evening, the power went out during dinner. The room went dark. We sat there in silence, candlelight flickering. For the first time in months, there was nothing to distract him. No phone, no television, just us. "You look tired," he said suddenly. My heart jumped. "I am," I admitted. He nodded. "Work has been hard," he said. And that was it. I realized then that he wasn't cruel. He wasn't unkind. He was simply living in a world where I no longer existed as a person. Only as a presence. Later that week, I overheard him on the phone. Laughing. Speaking with energy I hadn't heard in years. I stood in the hallway, listening. Not jealous. Just confused. Where did that version of him go when he was with me? That night, I asked him quietly, "Are you happy?" He paused. "I think so," he said. "Why?" "No reason," I replied. But there was a reason. I just didn't know how to say it. I began writing letters I never sent. Small notes to myself. I used to matter. I am still here. I am more than this. I hid them in a drawer. Even my thoughts had become private. One morning, I didn't feel well at all. My chest felt tight. My head ached. "I think I should see a doctor," I said. He looked at me briefly. "Can it wait?" he asked. "I have an important meeting." I nodded. It always could. That day, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt too big. I wondered if he would notice. If I stopped speaking entirely. I wondered how long it would take. Marriage, I learned, doesn't always end with anger. Sometimes it ends quietly, with two people in the same room, living separate lives. That night, as he slept, I watched him. Not with resentment, not with blame, with sadness. I still loved him. I just wasn't sure he remembered loving me. Soft fade out. Sound cue. Slow piano, candle flame flicker, distant night sounds. There was no single moment that broke me. No loud argument. No raised voice. No door slammed hard enough to shake the walls. There were no tears falling in front of him. No shaking hands begging for understanding. No sentence that changed everything in one breath. It was much quieter than that. So quiet that if someone had been watching us from outside, they would have thought everything was fine. But inside me, something had already begun to let go. It was the day I realized that I was tired. Not tired in my body alone, but tired in a deeper place. Tired of explaining my pain to someone who could no longer hear it. That morning, I woke up with a dull ache in my chest. Not sharp, not frightening, just heavy, like something had been sitting there for a long time. Without my permission, I stayed very still in bed. I listened to his breathing beside me. Slow, even, peaceful. I wondered how someone could sleep so calmly, while the person next to them felt like this. I sat on the edge of the bed, and waited for the feeling to pass. I told myself it always passed. That it would fade like it usually did. But it didn't. It stayed with me, as I stood up, as I walked to the kitchen, as I opened the curtains and let the morning light in. In the kitchen, I moved slowly. The floor felt cold under my feet. The room was quiet. I filled the kettle, placed it on the stove, Waited. My stove. Waited. My hands were shaking, just a little. Not enough to be noticed. Enough for me to feel. I poured tea into his favorite cup. The blue one. The one with the small crack near the handle. He liked that crack. He once said it made the cup feel familiar. I held it carefully, but my fingers slipped. The cup fell. The sound was sharp and sudden. Too loud for such a quiet morning. Blue pieces scattered across the floor. I stared at them. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I felt like this was the kind of moment people cry about. But nothing came. I just felt empty, like the sound had knocked something loose inside me. When he came into the kitchen, he stopped when he saw the broken pieces. "What happened?" he asked. His voice was flat, not angry, not concerned. "It slipped," I said. My voice sounded calm, even to me. He sighed. "That was my favorite cup." "I know," I replied. That was all. No question if I was okay. No look at my face. No pause. Just that. I knelt down to clean the floor. Carefully, slowly, piece by piece. I didn't want to miss anything. I didn't want someone to step on the glass later. My finger caught a sharp edge. I felt a sting. A thin line of blood appeared. I watched it for a second. Then I wrapped my finger in tissue. And kept going. I didn't want to make a mess. I had spent years cleaning up quietly. This was no different. Later that day, the dizziness came again. Stronger this time. The room felt like it tilted slightly. Just enough to scare me. I grabbed the back of a chair. And sat down before the world could move any further. I closed my eyes. I took slow breaths. I thought about calling him. Just to hear his voice. Just to say I wasn't feeling well. I imagined the call. His voice, distracted. A pause. A sigh. "Can it wait? I'm busy. Try to rest." I decided not to call. I didn't want to feel like a burden. For something I had learned to carry alone. In the afternoon, I opened the drawer with the letters again. The drawer made a soft sound. When I pulled it open, inside were the pieces of a different life. Notes, cards, old words written when love still felt careful. I sat on the bed and read them slowly, one by one. I didn't feel angry. I had passed that stage quietly. A long time ago. I felt tired. Tired of holding memories alone. Tired of remembering for both of us. I folded the letters back carefully. And placed them where they belonged. When he came home that evening, he looked upset. "Long day," he said. I nodded. "Dinner is ready." The words came out automatically. Like muscle memory. We sat down to eat. The sound of forks on plates filled the room. Silence again. The kind of silence that presses on your ears. "I might have to travel next week," he said suddenly. "For work." I looked up at him. "How long?" I asked. "Not sure," he replied. "Maybe 2 weeks." I nodded. "Okay." My hands froze for a moment around my fork. He didn't notice. He was already thinking about something else. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling again. The ache in my chest was still there. But something else had joined it. Acceptance. Not pain. Not fear. Just a quiet understanding. I realized I had been trying to be understood. By someone who no longer knew how to listen. And I was tired of translating myself into silence. The next day, I didn't pack his lunch. Not to punish him. Not to make a point. I simply didn't do it. Or maybe, for the first time, I remembered myself. I made tea. I sat down. I let the morning be slow. When he reached for his bag at the door, he paused. "Did you pack lunch?" he asked. "No," I said calmly. I didn't. He looked surprised. Oh, he said. Then he left. The door closed softly. I sat down at the table. The chair felt steady beneath me. My heart was steady too. For the first time in a long while. I didn't feel guilty. That afternoon, I went to the doctor. Alone. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant. I sat in a plastic chair and listened to my own breathing. It sounded louder than usual. When my name was called, it sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. You need to rest, the doctor said after listening. You've been carrying too much. I nodded. He didn't ask what. I didn't explain. For once, I didn't feel the need to. That evening, when he came home, I didn't rush. Dinner wasn't ready. The house wasn't perfect. I was sitting by the window, just sitting, watching the light fade. He looked around the room. Is everything okay? He asked. Yes, I said. And for the first time, it was true. I didn't explain my silence. I didn't list my sacrifices. I didn't ask to be seen. I simply stopped trying. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange peace. Not happiness, not sadness, just stillness. The kind that comes when you stop fighting to hold something together, all by yourself. It started with small things. The kind of things he used to miss, without noticing, not because he didn't care, not because he was cruel, because they had always been there. The house felt different, not messy, not wrong, just quiet in a new way. A silence that didn't feel empty, but unfamiliar. The first morning I didn't wake up early. The alarm rang into the darkness. He opened his eyes and frowned. The sound felt strange without movement around it. No footsteps, no clinking cups, no soft sounds from the kitchen. The room stayed still. He sat up slowly. The bed beside him was warm. I was still asleep. That alone confused him. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom for a moment. Just standing, watching. He noticed the way my chest rose and fell. The way my hands rested loosely instead of folded. The calm on my face. I felt his presence even with my eyes closed. Not threatening, not loud, just there. For a second, he thought about waking me. About saying my name. But something stopped him. He didn't know what. So he dressed quietly, buttoned his shirt without the usual rush, tied his shoes slower than normal. Then he left. The door closed gently behind him. That evening, he came home to a silent house again. Not the comfortable silence he knew. This one pressed against him. Dinner was simple, not his favorite meal. The kind of meal made without planning, without attention to preference. He sat alone at the table. He checked his phone, then put it down, then picked it up again, then placed it face down. Something about the silence felt heavy now, like it was waiting for him to understand it. The next day, he forgot his lunch. Not because I didn't pack it, because he didn't check. He reached into his bag at work and felt the empty space. He stared at it longer than necessary. He bought food outside. It was fine, but it didn't taste right. He told himself it was nothing, just a change in routine. But something followed him home that day, a thought he couldn't place. Days passed. The house continued its quiet rhythm, and slowly, he began to notice things he had ignored for years. The dust on the shelf I always cleaned. Not thick, just enough to catch the light. He wiped it with his finger. Frowned. The laundry waiting longer than usual. Folded, but not rushed. Placed neatly, but without urgency. The way I sat by the window, instead of moving around. Not tired, not sad, just still. like someone resting after a long walk. One evening, he stopped in the doorway. He watched me for a moment. Before speaking, "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. I didn't look at him. Not because I was angry. Because I didn't need to. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. The room felt unfamiliar. Not wrong. Just different. He listened to my breathing. Even. Calm. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he asked how I was feeling, and waited for the answer. He turned toward me. "You've been quiet," he said. "So have you," I replied softly. He didn't know what to say. The truth sat between us. Unspoken but heavy. The next morning, he made his own tea. He stood in the kitchen. Longer than usual. He hesitated with the sugar. Added too much. Stirred. Took a sip. Paused. He stared at the cup. Then poured it out. Tried again. This time slower. That afternoon, he opened a drawer, looking for a charger. He wasn't rushing. He pulled things out carefully. That's when he found the letters. Mine. Not the old ones. Not the ones he once wrote. The new ones. The ones I wrote to myself. He sat down on the bed. "Read the first one. I am still here." He swallowed. "Read the second. I am tired." His breath caught on the third. "I want to be seen." His hands shook. Not violently. Just enough to make the paper tremble. He read them again. And again. Each word landed slowly, like steps backward, through years he thought were fine. That evening, he came home early. Earlier than he had in a long time. I was sitting at the table. Not eating. Not waiting. Just sitting. "I didn't know," he said quietly. His voice was low. Careful. I looked up. "I never asked," he continued. "You never told me." I nodded. "That's true. I thought everything was fine," he said. I smiled gently. "That's because I made it look that way." He sat down across from me. For the first time in years. He looked at my face. Really looked. Not the house behind me. Not the table in front of us. Me. "You should have said something," he whispered. "I did," I replied. Just not with words. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it didn't push us apart. It held us still. He finally heard it. The years of quiet. The unspoken weight. The love that had been doing all the work. "I miss us," he said. "So do I replied. But something in my voice told him. It wasn't the same anymore. That night, he held my hand. Carefully. Like he was afraid I might disappear if he held too tightly. I didn't pull away, but I didn't move closer either. Some distances aren't about space. They're about time. Regret has a sound. It's quiet, heavy, slow. It sounds like a man realizing the love he took for granted was carrying him the whole time. He noticed everything now. The way I winced when I stood up. The way my eyes lingered on nothing. The way my smile arrived late. And left early. He noticed. Too late. And yet, even late understanding changes something. Not the past, but the way the present breathes. We did not change overnight. Life rarely works that way. Real change does not arrive with noise. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask to be believed. It arrives quietly, almost shyly, as if it is unsure whether it is welcome. That is how it happened with us. There were no sudden hugs in the kitchen. No arms wrapping around me while I stood at the stove. No apologies spoken loudly enough to fill the room. There were no long speeches. No carefully planned words meant to fix years in a single evening. No promises spoken out loud and repeated again and again. There were only small moments. Careful ones. Moments that felt fragile, like they might disappear if handled too roughly. It started with questions. Simple ones. Questions that had once been unnecessary. Because he assumed he already knew the answers. He began asking if I had eaten. Not loudly, not proudly, not like a man trying to prove something. Softly, almost unsure, like he was afraid the question itself might break something that was only just beginning to breathe again. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. Not to punish him, not to make a point. Some days I simply didn't know how to explain what my body needed, or what my heart could hold. He started coming home earlier. Not dramatically early, not with announcements, just earlier than before. He would place his bag down quietly, wash his hands, sit with me at the table. No phone in his hand. At first, the silence made him uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, cleared his throat, looked around the room as if searching for something to do. He was used to noise filling the space between us. Screens, distractions, excuses. Now there was nothing to hide behind. Just two people sitting in the truth of each other. At first, he tried to speak too much. He asked questions quickly, one after another. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Should I make tea? I could see the effort. I could hear the worry behind his voice. But effort alone does not heal distance. So I stayed quiet, and slowly, he learned to sit inside the silence. He learned that silence does not always mean rejection. Sometimes it means rest. Sometimes it means trust. Sometimes it means a person is finally listening to themselves for the first time in years. One evening, while we were sitting together, the light outside fading softly, he spoke again. I didn't see how much you were carrying, he said. His voice was steady, but careful. I nodded, not because I forgave him, not because I blamed him, because I was tired of carrying explanations too. Some truths don't need to be defended. They just need to be acknowledged. A few days later, I went back to the doctor. This time, he came with me. He sat in the chair beside mine. Not distracted, not impatient, listening. I noticed how still he was. How his hands rested on his knees. When the doctor spoke, he listened the way people listen. When something finally feels real. She needs rest, the doctor said. Not urgently, not angrily, just honestly. I watched his face change. Not panic. Recognition. The kind that settles slowly. The kind that stays. At home, he tried to help. Not perfectly, not confidently, but sincerely. He cooked sometimes. Simple meals. Nothing fancy. He cleaned awkwardly. Missed corners. Forgot small things. He folded towels wrong. I didn't correct him. We were both learning. Learning how to share space again. Learning how to exist without one person doing all the holding. I noticed how careful he became. How he watched my reactions. How he paused before speaking. Not because he was afraid of me. Because he was finally aware that words could either heal or reopen something fragile. But something had shifted inside me. I was still there, still present, still waking up in the same house, still sharing meals, still walking beside him. Yet part of me had grown quiet, in a way that would not return. Not broken, just changed. Love does that sometimes. It survives, but it changes shape. It becomes less about longing, and more about understanding, less about expectation, and more about honesty. One night, as rain tapped against the window again, soft and steady, he asked a question he had been holding back. Can we be okay again? The room felt still.